Hello, class. Today we're going to talk about one aspect of short fiction, which is going to be the plot. We're going to look at plot structures and the basic plot structure, and then a couple of the other components that might or might not be included in the plot. But let's talk first about conflict. Conflict is one of the major components of writing. So I have a cousin who teaches junior high, and a few years ago, she asked me, are there any stories that are just 100% positive? She said that her principal wants to focus on positive stories in all of the classes. And so I tried to think of a few positive ones, especially for that age group. I really had a hard time coming up with stories in which there wasn't conflict or where there wasn't something bad that had happened. And so conflict, I realized, was a major part of writing. And that makes sense because if there's no conflict, then why write about this story? Who just wants to hear about the best things of a character's life? That would be like going on Facebook and seeing all the wonderful things that your high school classmates have been doing when you know that there is actually conflict in their life that is probably much more interesting than what they're posting. Okay, so conflict is going to be a necessary part of the story. Then let's look at specific plot components. So this is the basic structure for plot. If you are writing a short story, you'll probably follow this structure. All of the stories that we read are likely to follow this structure. And so it's important to know kind of what these components are and how they work within a story. First, we have exposition. This is the background, or we're getting the setting for that conflict. This might be explaining what the reader needs to know prior to coming into the story. If we think about, movies like Star Wars, where they give you in a galaxy far, far away, and it gives you a little bit of introduction to the movie. That's kind of what the exposition is doing within a story, is it's getting that background so you're at least know enough that you can understand what the story is going to be about. Next, we have the rising action. So these are things that set that conflict in motion. These are some of the obstacles that a character or a few characters are experiencing throughout the story, and it shows the complications that they are going through. Sometimes the rising action might be a secret that they are holding from the rest of the characters, and it causes problems because of that secret. This is going to be that rising action. The rising action then leads to the climax. This is the emotional high point of the action. For an example, I imagine everybody has seen The Wizard of Oz. The climax would be when Dorothy throws the water on the witch and kills the witch. This is the high point of the action. It's like the most thrilling part of the story. And this is where that conflict kind of comes to a head. Next, we have the falling action. So this is where the aftermath of the climax is now explored. What happens after that major action or major thrilling part? Then we get the conclusion or the denouement. Um, this is the resolution of that conflict. What ended up happening at the end. Sometimes this conclusion is, for writers, the hardest part is where do I actually end this story? And so the conclusion is not always resolved for the reader because, we're not going to go months and months beyond that conflict. We'll see that in stories like Heels for White Elephants, where that conclusion or that resolution is never really finished. But it is the conclusion of at least that moment of time in which the story takes place. The visual representation would look like this. So we start with our exposition, we rise in that action, we hit the climax, we fall in the action, and then we have the conclusion or that denouement. Let's then look at a couple of additional aspects of a plot. The first one is foreshadowing. This is a hint or indication of an upcoming event. I remember that I was in a fiction writing class and we were writing novels, and the teacher explained foreshadowing in this way. She said that if you describe an axe over the fireplace, somebody is going to be killed with that axe somewhere within the story. So foreshadowing is bringing up something that is going to be revealed later on in the story. I like foreshadowing in that when the action actually happens, then you say, oh, there were markers or there were hints that this was going to happen and I didn't recognize them. Or for clever readers, we do recognize them and say, oh, I think this is what's going to happen based on that foreshadowing. It's a technique that's fun, and I do like when writers have included this in their stories. The next is dramatic irony. Irony is a concept that in literature is a bit different than what students would commonly think of irony. It's more like sarcasm. It's language that says one thing but means the opposite. We can see that in stories in which maybe a character is agreeable with another character or siding with another character, and we know that that is false, that they're actually meaning the opposite or they are going to do the opposite. So this creates that dramatic irony. What's nice about this is it really relies upon the reader to understand that it is irony. If it's read as literal, it can really change your perspective of the story. What's important to know about plot is that it is a device to reveal human nature. So we think about conflicts in our own lives that we can associate with these conflicts in the stories. Our conflicts usually have some type of background, they have some rising action or something that leads up to that conflict. Sometimes they do have a climax to them. Maybe it's a confrontation, maybe it's an exam, whatever it is that rising action leads to, or whatever our conflict is leading to. We hit that high point or that thrilling part where we actually deal with the conflict. And then we go through that falling action. We look at the results of the conflict. Maybe we're going to have a confrontation with a sibling and we have our screaming match. And then afterwards, we see the results of that. Maybe we both feel better because now we're understood, or maybe it leads to one person storming off. Then we get that conclusion. Maybe we leave and we shake hands. Maybe the other person, because they stormed off, you say, that's it, I'm not going to reach out anymore. And that's the conclusion. So a story really, it's showing this human nature. It's showing our conflicts through other characters. And that's what I love about literature altogether is that it helps build this empathy with other people. That is plot. You can read more about it in the textbook. Make sure you read those assigned pages and look for plot elements as you're reading through the stories as we go through this semester.